We will now make some more trim, this time on the Frieze, and this time we won't just do straight lines, we'll actually do some curved arc pieces and actually show you some of the do's and don'ts of working with a curve in your profile for making trim. So the first thing I need to do is draw a closed polyline, just like I did for my fascia. This time I'll do it for a new Frieze board. So I'll draw a polyline. I'll make it 5 inches. I'll make this 1 inch. I'll come down. No, I won't get my line yet. I'll go down 1 inch. Make an arc. F8 here. Draw a nice curve. Get back to my line command. And make that 1 inch. 1 inch. I'll close that up. So what I have, if I take a little dimension, it's a 5 inch by 5 inch is the extent of the trim. So it's 5 inches tall, 5 inches wide. And I have 1 inch straight line, 1 inch straight line. I have a 3-inch radius arc here in my trim. So just a very simple shape. You might see some other kind of cornice or something like that under your Frieze. So if I want to convert that to a trim, I right click, convert to profile definition, and I'll select this insertion point. Again, the insertion point is 0, 0 is the height, the top of the trim goes in the Y, the bottom of it goes into the X direction, and I'll say it's new, and I'll just call this Cove. Okay, so now we have a profile saved. So now we need to convert that into a piece of trim. So I'll go to my Style Manager. I shouldn't do my quick keys. I'll go to Style Manager in the Manage tab. Go into the VisionREZ Trim folder. Go to the Trim Styles. And I'll start from my wood drip edge. And I'll copy it and paste it in like I typically like to do for making a new piece of trim. I'll call this Wood Cove. And we can see in the General tab, its name is Wood Cove. In the design rules, instead of using the drip edge profile that we made earlier, we'll use the Cove profile. And if we want to take a look at it in the viewer, we'll change the width to 5 and the height by 5 because that was the extent of the trim. If we take a look at it, it's got this nice curved, smooth view there. So once we have all that, we can select OK. And if we want to actually apply it to the trim, we can hop back in the Style Manager. I could just hit Apply. And in the VisionREZ tab, in the Roof Styles, the 1x6 fascia style that I'm using for this example, I can change this trim to Cove, change the Frieze height from 4 to 5, and the width from 1 to 5. I can use this Copy to Rake button, or I can come in here and manually do the same thing on the rake side. Change that to 5, change that to 5. Select OK. Now we can see in our plan view that we have a new fascia piece. And so if I take a look at this in the object viewer, we have a nice smooth curve here underneath our roof. And that's nice and very smooth. When it hits this transition, it might be a little odd looking. Yeah, it says that nice piece there. Alright. So if I made a generated elevation, if I just drew in an elevation line and generated a piece of this roof, and that's usually what we want to see from our plan, is we generate this elevation, we have a nice smooth curve. We do have a line where that arc meets that straight line. And if we wanted to, we could edit that out. But one of the more common problems with the curved trim is when we draw this trim, and the extent of this trim is 5 by 5, if we decided to shrink or stretch that dimension of the trim after we've made it, and so the extent 5 by 5 isn't matching our profile's extent, it'll actually stretch that curve in an odd fashion. So as an example, if I made the height of this trim 6 inches, you can see that I added all these lines here in the plan view. And if we actually isolate this in the object viewer to take a look at, we can see that inside that curve we have all these little lines in here. And what's happened is the profile of that curve has been stretched. And so instead of stretching that curve smoothly, it actually makes those into straight lines and bisects those, and it's little line, little line, little line, little line, little line, and it stretches that curve, and you get all these lines. And we see that here in plan view, and also if we actually refresh this elevation, it shows all those lines drawn out in the generated elevation. When that prints out, that's just line, 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 and that just looks like a big black smudge, so that's no good. So keep in mind, when you're making these curved pieces of trim, your extents have to absolutely match the extents of the profile, has to absolutely match the extents, the width and the height of the trim. So if I change that back to 5, you can see that that all goes away. And if I refresh this trim, I have just a single line where arc meets the line. So that's the way, and usually it's not as easy to see as 5 by 5 doesn't match 5 by 6. What usually happens is if somebody stretches something, some little infinitesimal point like 0.1, and so if I drew a line and showed you that that is 5 inches and it's just a little bit off, it might be 0.1, it might be 0.01, but it's not exactly 5 by 5. And so if that's the case, say this is actually 4.9 inches, and I updated my profile, said that it's existing, and I overwrite this cove, it does the same thing. So this 5 by 4.9, and my trim is 5 by 5, and it smushes or stretches that trim where we get all those lines again. So again, make sure that your profile extents match your trim dimensions. And that's a key point in working with curved trim.